Welcome to SAM Conversation, an online program of South Asia Monitor. I'm Col Anil Bhat, and the topic today is: has corporatization of the ordnance factories benefited the armed forces? For this, we have an expert on the subject, Maj Gen Rajan Kochhar. His last appointment in the army was as Major General Army Ordnance Corps in a command headquarters. Welcome, Major Kochhar.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and a very interesting and contemporary subject you have chosen, sir.
Yes, we hope to get a lot of lot of info about it from you. Going back since independence, the British left us with, I think, 47 odd ordnance factories. And yet, ironically, we were the one country who had a threat from two nations, two inimical nations in the neighbor as our neighbors, and our 70 to 75% dependence for weaponry for the army, navy, and air force was by importing. It is also, I think, a misfortune that we had a defense minister who was contemptuous enough to say that our ordnance factories are better off making pressure cookers or coffee machines. That's late Mr. V.K. Krishnaman on record. He was the second defense minister. Anyway, it's the 1962 war, which the Indian Army fought with the old .303 bolt action rifle, the Lee Enfield. We finally got shaken into, the government got shaken into producing a new rifle ourselves, which we did at the factory, the 7.62 self-loading rifle, which saw used for a number of decades, and good rifle, little on the heavy side. And then we came on to the 5.56 INSAS, which is not free of defects. Del Kochhar, what do you have to say about pre-corporatization and post?
Very interesting question, sir, you have posed here, because the first ordnance factory came up in Ishapur in 1801. So it's been a very long journey. And on 1st October 2021 was the decision to corporatize the Ordnance Factory Board. I am on record. I have written an article in the Economic Times, which was published on 13th October 2021, carrying out a detailed analysis on what exactly is the roadmap and how this corporatization is going to face the challenges. Today, the very basic concept when you say corporatization, sir, it means a lot. But actually, what has happened with the ordnance factory is that we have only put uh, the old wine in a new bottle. Because what happens here is that when you talk about corporatization, you not only talk about the change of structures, you also talk about change of command and control, a change of the way you function. Unfortunately, what has actually happened is with the ordnance factories is that the ordnance factories, all 41 of them, have a targeted capacity of churning out 17,000 crores worth of items in a year. And the value of orders which these factories have been getting, and this has been my personal experience being in the Army Ordnance Corps, where I was interacting with a number of ordnance factories, is that they are only getting around 9,000 to 12,000 crores worth of orders. So when this corporatization was ordered, the government laid down a target of 30,000 crores a year. So if you take that as a benchmark, and if we say that has corporatization made a difference, I would be slightly inclined to say that it has not. And the reason is that whatever target was set to us, it's now we have entered the third year. 3 years handholding time was given by the government, so we still have got a couple of months to go. But I don't think the situation will change drastically in the couple of months, because we are still, the ordnance factory is still grappling with orders. And what has happened here is this statement of the defense minister as well as of the various people in the government, which say that 45% of the defense orders will go to the private sector. So now, if you are focusing on the private sector and saying that 45% of the defense orders, and let me inform you, sir, pre-corporatization, 80% of the defense orders were being placed on ordnance factories. We were hardly going to the private sector. Now this has been a paradigm shift. So in case you want to sustain these organizations, you see, you have converted 41 ordnance factories into 7 defense PSUs, and now I have come to know that these are being further reduced to 4 defense PSUs. So if you want to sustain them, you have to give them orders. But when these orders are not forthcoming at all, how can we say that corporatization is a success? So I uh, leave it to the finer judgment of the viewers to take this outcome to its logical conclusion, sir.
Jan Kochhar, if you can please explain for our viewers what is what were the orders providing us with before corporatization, and what did corporatization mean when it was implement, when it was done. If you could just for a for a layman to
Uh,
just understand.
okay, very good question, sir. Uh, the areas the ordnance factories were actually covering is, first is ammunition, then explosives, vehicles, the spares for the vehicles, small arms, weapons, and artillery guns, uh, electronics and the night vision devices,
Devices.
uh, ancillaries, like whatever you require for the manufacture of a weapon a system or a manufacture of ammunition. We
Yeah.
had the ancillary factories also supporting them, and then we had general stores and clothing. Means everything, sir. Today, ordnance inventory is 4.5 lakh items. So if
As
we
we say, it's right from a pin a whole tank.
and lastly, let me also include the parachutes and
Yeah.
the entire paraphernalia which goes into the supply dropping equipment, which was also being taken care of by the ordnance factories in collaboration with the private sector, because ordnance factories didn't have the expertise to go in for that. So we went to Larsen and Tubro and we placed an order of them on the supply dropping equipment, and we got from them. So broadly, these are the major you, you components or commodities. You can break it down to rifles, you can break it down to carbines, you can break it down to pistols, you can break it down to 155 mm, 130 mm, you can break it down to air defense equipment. So all this, so whatever the Indian Army's military needs were, both in terms of equipment and in terms of equipping of the soldiers, equipping of the units to fight a war. This was being provided by the ordnance factory. Now, coming to your next part of the question, what has changed? Have we included any new item for manufacture, or have we taken out something which we were manufacturing earlier? So, according to my information, uh, nothing new has been added, uh, but we have reduced a large number of items, especially if you talk about the troops comfort limited, because this is one of the seven defense PSUs. It was looking after the clothing. So what we have done is we have removed 200 items of clothing from the ordnance factory, and we have given these financial powers to the unit commanders uh, to buy these items from the local market. So that has further reduced the demand on the ordnance factories. Second aspect is that we have taken out all expendable stores from the inventory of the Army Ordnance Corps, and we have given it to the unit commanders. Now, like these are civil and use items, you can buy them straight from the market in terms of paints, lubricants, and all, etc. So you don't have to go to ordnance to place a demand. So this has impacted this troops comfort limited, and I think now it's closing down. And the Glider India Limited, which was manufacturing parachutes, it is going to be merged as one entity. So, after corporatization, we are seeing there has been a reduction in the dependence on ordnance factories, which was not expected, because we expected the orders. And a recommendation which I had also given was that we need not restrict ordnance factories to only the armed forces. We have to include in a big way, though it was happening earlier, but it was very, very limited. We have to include the paramilitary forces,
The
and we
Central
have to
Armed
include,
Police Forces, the Central Armed
yes,
Police Forces, and
yes, yes, and exports. Uh,
ah,
Now, according to my information, when we started the corporatization, we were exporting only 200 crores in a year. Now the government has given till 2025, we have to touch a figure of 50,000 crores. And
hmm.
finance minister has just made a statement that 24,000 crores are going to be targeted in the financial year 24-25. If this be so, I am very sorry to say, sir, on your channel and for all your viewers, that the ordnance factory is going to play a very limited role, and that is why the private sector has been roped in now, with 45% of the defense orders going to the private sector.
uh, when you said that uh, 41 ordnance factories were uh, merged into sort of um, a number of PSUs, seven, and they now reduced to four. What did it amount to on the ground? What about um, uh, the the properties of the on the ground, the the uh, the the premises of the ordnance factories, were they put to, they were continued, um, production continued in those spaces?
Sir, very good question. I'll just give you a small example. Advanced Weapons and Equipments Limited, which is manufacturing artillery guns and small arms ammunition.
Uh-huh.
There, there are eight factories which are manufacturing this, and these factories are located in four states. So
Okay,
they
okay.
are not co-located with each other. That is point number one. And Yantra India Limited is being merged into Advanced Weapons and Equipment. These
Uh-huh.
two will become only one defense PSU. Yantra is also in eight factories distributed over eight states. So now we have a very interesting situation, sir. We have 16 ordnance factories under one umbrella in 12 states. So you can see this hodgepodge kind of an arrangement. See, if I want to start my defense production, I want to sort out my supply chain. I want to sort out my supply chain management issues. So now, if I am going to operate in 12 states, and if I have got 16 factories which are getting merged into one defense PSU spread all over, and all the factories functional, sir, and all the factories have got a manpower. Today, ordnance factories have a manpower of 72,000 people, sir. So these workforce have not been retrenched. They have been to some extent distributed within the same defense PSUs. So now this corporatization has actually ensured that supposing I have 16 factories under my umbrella, so I can move my manpower from one factory to another depending upon the kind of orders I receive for a particular component. So that has been the one, I can say, advantage of corporatization, that I have been able to manage things in a manner that I can promote efficiency in production. The targets, one important aspect of corporatization, because we should not actually wish it out completely. One advantage which has accrued out of corporatization is now that they have become more efficient. Targets are being maintained now. Earlier, when I was about 2018, I retired, sir. At that point of time, the ordnance factories were taking 5 to 7 years to actually give us our requirements. So it was staggered over 5 years. But now that situation has improved. Now, within a year or two, whatever requirements of the army are there and placed on the ordnance factory, the government is ensuring, the Department of Defense production is ensuring that these requirements are met in the ensuing financial year, or at the most, it may stagger for another more year, but not beyond that, sir.
Very interesting inputs you provided us. Now tell me, Atmanirbharta, self-sufficiency is something which we, very correctly should have been aiming for and are aiming for now. I know that there have strides been made in this. What do you have to say about this corporatization? Has it helped in our in our becoming self-sufficient? You mentioned exports also in the past. Export is something which is you can go in for only once you have our own armed forces being provided with what they need.
Sir, the very good question you have actually posed to me. Uh, Here, there has been a debate, corporatization versus privatization. This debate is still actually going on, that do we privatize everything, or we have a balance between corporatization and privatization. What will happen is that in case we privatize everything, then we will be left at the women fancies of that MNC or the private. So it is imperative that the government retains the control of these agencies. Whatever we may say that bureaucracy has actually harmed the growth of the ordnance factories, it is a fact. But then today the bureaucracy also has to realize that they have to be a facilitator rather than an independent impediment in the growth of the ordnance factory. So it is important now as we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, because that is your question. Now, as far as Atmanirbhar Bharat is concerned, sir, I would say these ordnance factories, if you have to sustain them, see now you have brought them down to 4 defense PSUs from 41 factories, from 7 defense PSUs, you have come down to 4. So, these are the right steps which are being taken, because the government has realized that it is impossible to give them orders worth 30,000 crores, and the reason is a lack of quality controls.
Hmm.
Today, unfortunately, if you see the CAG report on ammunition, sir, you will be shocked to know there is so much tons of ammunition worth crores of rupees which is lying segregated, and it is a defective ammunition which we don't use in peacetime, but we will definitely use it in war. So, what will happen is uh, we have war wastages reserves, sir. These ordnance factories cater for these war wasted reserves also, and we keep on uh, recycling them to ensure that the shelf life of that item is actually maintained. We have actually missiles more than 20 years old in our inventory. The life of the missile is not more than 5 to 7, 8 years, but we keep on extending their life. So ultimately, what will happen is when we will fire this missile, it will not hit the targets. So uh, these are the compulsions we have as a defense organization. We have to maintain the reserves, and in peacetime, we can't be firing all the ammunition, because there is certain ammunition which is very, very costly and high price, like missiles. So we can't be actually firing these missiles at regular intervals in peacetime. One or two, four, five missiles we may fire to see a particular batch or a lot is actually working fine. But beyond that, we can't be using these missiles. So this is a paradoxical situation we actually face in the armed forces today, that we have to, especially the warlike inventory which we have to maintain, we are not able to use this inventory in peacetime, but we still are uh, 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 required to actually maintain it, because we never know when a war will take place. So we have to be prepared at all times. So, and one last point is the surge capacity, sir. Now, today's warfare has actually changed. We have seen in Ukraine, the war is actually going into the third year. We have seen in Gaza and Israel there, the it's now getting into the fourth month. So we used to talk about uh, 30 days or 40 days of WWR, is 30 days normal and 30 days intense. So all these concepts have to change now, sir. We cannot fight a war unless we develop a surge capacity. And tomorrow's war is not going to be a short war, sir. It is going to be a long drawn affair. And in case we want to prepare for such an eventuality, which we have seen in the Ukraine war, which we have seen in the Israel war, we have to develop a surge capacity, and that surge capacity has to be the domain of the ordnance factories, because they are the ones who will be required to manufacture ammunition and keep on manufacturing it in a very, very short time period to make it available to the field army or the air force or the navy. So these are the challenges I see. Right now this surge capacity has not been built in the ordnance factories, because they are just able to cope up with the existing orders, and and the deficiencies are there. The 130 he, there was a deficiency. 105 there is also a deficiency, and the tank ammunition also. So we have to first gear up this ordnance factory industry, and especially exports. If we have to export, we have to meet the quality criteria. It's a competitive world today, sir. It is not only the cost, it is the quality also which has to be ensured. And no country will buy from you if that country is not satisfied that you are not actually maintaining the international standards. So we have to come up to that challenge of those international standards. Only then we can compete in a global scenario. So,
Very last, very briefly, if you can, uh, how are we as far as finding the pin threads of China and Pakistan? Um, how are we off? And as briefly
uh,
as possible.
sir, you briefly, I would say, sir, that Pakistan we can contain, because basically it's going to be a defensive battle. It is basically going to ensure that those guys don't actually come in and occupy, and we are quite well stocked for that. Uh, Pakistan is hardly got 4 to 5 days of reserves with them, so they won't be able to actually give us much of a fight. But the problem is with China, because China also knows that war is not an option. If anything happens on the northern front, it is going to be a limited kind of scenario in which we're going to have skirmishes, or a particular sector gets operated. So that is the assessment, because today China also knows that if it gets into a war on the northern sector, it is not going to win that war, sir, because basically mountain warfare is different. And you have actually heard in this budget also, this news has come that the drones sale 31 has been approved now, and 3,000 smart munitions weapon platforms are being supplied to us by the United States. So I feel that we are going in the right direction. And even if there is a two-front war, I granted to our armed forces that will be able to sustain it, sir.
No, no. As far as the armed forces are concerned, we have no doubts that in the past also they have done brilliantly with shortages. But that's not the way we would like to function, and it is hoped that that's not the way it will be, because we must be very um, we must be very clear. The government must be very clear about the fact that we have to be with a foe like China. We have to be very well equipped. We must match them as far as possible in it may not be in numbers of personnel, but certainly in weaponry.
I
And
agree with you.
and as far as
One, so
Pakistan is concerned, it's a different. Um, it's sorting Pakistan out. It's first we should get rid of terrorism, which which despite the very good enough to continue it. Um, and that there are ways, it's not impossible, but it needs a very strong political will, to do so. I will like to Thank you, General Kochhar, for a very enlightening, session on what a lot of us uh, need to know about the functioning of the ordnance, our Army Ordnance Corps, and the functioning of arms production in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be on your show, sir. And I'm seeing that your show is got a very wide coverage, and I'm sure a large number of audience will also come to know about corporatization and the way forward, what our country endeavors to do in the next 10 years, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you, Jai Hind.